some have been shifted to other operations, oil operations or other duties, and some are sitting idle. So the question I'm asking you is, was this a waste of $2 billion? What do your members think? Did they waste this money now?
I certainly would hope they wouldn't think of it as a waste, because we have a government agency which has twice said that they are not following the law. Sooner or later, that is going, I believe, to prove us right, to prove that we have been right. So these vessels have a long lifespan and will be utilized. Additionally, and maybe it's a very small victory, but by building these vessels, we have recapitalized some of Mr. Paxton's shipyards here, which have then enabled those shipyards to participate in some very big government projects. And again, I think that in itself proves that the Jones Act works as intended. And that's not, I'm not saying that's worth $2 billion, but I do think that shows something.
All right, so let's say, as you say, you know, you're assuming that at some point we will do the right thing, and CBP will change its interpretation and come back to the rightful interpretation that the Jones Act does cover this. So the question is, if that occurs, what economic benefits do you think this proper enforcement of the Jones Act will have for your members? How will this impact your members? If what you're saying is ultimately the CBP understands and makes the right interpretation, how will this impact your members?
You know, I think it will definitely provide an economic benefit for our members. But more than that, I would look at what it would provide for our nation. And looking at that, my organization hired a domestic economist here from within the United States, and that economist found that correct interpretation of the Jones Act by CBP would create 3,200 new jobs in the United States, would put $700 million into the United States economy, and would create wages of $155 million increase. That is, of course, in addition to the 500,000 men and women in this country that are already employed due to the Jones Act.
So what you're saying is, if there was a correct interpretation of the Jones Act by the CBP, we truly would make America great again. Thank you, and I yield back.
Amen. I'd like to close here by yielding to the ranking member, Mr. Garamundi.
I'll try to do this quickly. Mr. Weber appropriately raised the question of the export of a strategic national asset, natural gas and LNG. It's estimated that just 10 years from now that they'll take about 140 ships to export the potential LNG that is available in the United States for foreign trade. If just 5% of that were an American-built ships, we're talking some 7 ships. Probably 4, maybe 5 would have to be built in the meantime. Similarly, on crude oil, by 2028, if just 5% of the crude oil were to be shipped on American-built ships, we're talking some 12 ships. So if we were to require, as we once did with the North Slope of Alaska, that all of that oil be on American-built ships, but let's not be greedy, let's just say 5%, we could substantially increase the number of ships built in America by a significant number, maybe half a dozen by 2028 in LNG, maybe a little less. Crude oil, probably in the range of 12 to 15 ships in just 10 years, giving new life to the commercial shipbuilding industry in the United States. Now, the fact that we're proposing a piece of legislation that would do that brings me to the question to Mr. Paxton. Can you do it? Is it possible that we could actually build commercial LNG ships for the international trade as well as crude oil in that range over the next decade?
Well, first, I want to say thank you very much, Congressman Garamundi,
Microphone.
for the work you've been doing on this. Your staff has been excellent. I appreciate your time spent with a lot of my members working on really hard legislation. But yes, the answer is we could meet that demand. Again, we still want to build that 355-ship Navy, but truly building commercial vessels for LNG and crude export is what we did with the North Slope. I mean, that was part of the deal. And so if we could have some configuration of that again, you know, I know you've been working with my trade association for a long time on this. We want to get it right. We want it to be defensible, and we want to, you know, fight for it along with this committee and with you, sir. But yes, the answer is yes, we could